what exactly is Christianity? You ever think about that?
It's a great question.
Some people call it a religion. Some people call it a relationship. And those are all true, to an extent. But we read recently a book by a guy named Greg Koukl, who says that Christianity, more than just being a religion, more than being a relationship, is actually a worldview. And he defines worldview as a picture of reality. It's a certain understanding about how the universe works. We did a short series on the topic of worldview a while back. We'll link to that in the show notes, but what I really want to tell you about is a special event that we have coming up. It's happening on March 21st at 7 p.m. here at the Lake Forest campus in the Refinery Theater. Unless it gets so big that we have to move it to the worship center. It could be in either of those two places. We'll try to keep you posted. But don't miss this event because Greg Koukl is coming out here to Saddleback to have a special evening with us. He's going to be teaching through his material on the story of reality. He's going to talk to us about the Christian worldview. What are the big hallmarks that define our faith? And sort of help establish the rational basis that the Christian faith is built upon. It is going to be a great night. It's going to have some great teaching from Greg. It's going to have some Q&A with him. You'll have an opportunity to meet him and just kind of shake his hand and have a fun night. We'll be there as well because we wouldn't miss it. It's brought to you by the Spiritual Maturity Team, and it is going to be a fun evening. So again, March 21st, 7 p.m. at the Lake Forest campus. Because we're always taking care of you guys who live far away. If you can't make it, you're too far, you're in another country, whatever. We still care about you. We still want you to be able to check this out. So we will be live streaming this event so you can view that. We'll link that in the show notes. And you can also watch it on our website after the fact. So if you miss it, we'll give you a link in the show notes so you can come back and watch what you missed. You won't want to miss that. Will you? No, you
I don't think so. So just to reiterate, that's going to be Wednesday, March 21st.
Correct.
And it's a great opportunity if you have some friends that, may have their qualms about this whole Christianity, Jesus
Yeah, they're
thing.
skeptics. They're not sure they buy into this whole thing.
Exactly.
Sure.
This is a perfect opportunity. Invite them out here, or to watch it as a viewing party at your house. Put some popcorn on and put Greg Koukl on.
Anybody who's curious about the faith, this is a good event for them. So don't miss that.
We have a great guest today. We are going to be talking with Jay Cranda, who is the online campus pastor. Perhaps many of you guys know him. And so we're excited to talk to him about his favorite person in the Bible. Again, we're not going to tell you who it is. You got to wait and see.
You have to wait another 15 seconds.
Yeah, but it's a doozy. And so come on back and enjoy the conversation with Jay.
Hey, we're back with Jay Cranda. Thanks for joining us, Jay.
Thank you.
You're probably the closest friend that I've had on the show. Longtime bud.
Wow.
Yeah. How do we know each other?
From the church we grew up at, pretty much. I know. So we've actually...
Please remind me. I know I recognize you.
You were like in my wedding and stuff.
I was your best man.
You were my best man.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is getting close.
I know. So yeah. So actually, what we're talking about today, we actually had Bible studies in college.
I forgot you were in that.
Yeah, we've talked about Daniel. So yeah,
that's sweet.
Shows
Let's bring Jay into the conversation.
Thought of you in prepping for this. I forgot that we went to college together. This is amazing.
College ministry.
Oh, yeah. Jay outran me in his schooling. I couldn't keep up. Anyway,
physically outran you, but it was
that never happened. Let's talk about what you do. You're the online pastor for Saddleback, as we've already told everybody. But tell us what that involves and what you love about that, how long you've been doing it, etc.
Yeah, so we offer our services online, both live and on demand. And so we offer a way for people to watch them, in all sorts of ways. But really, a lot of my job has been around that our kind of campus oversees all the follow-up on those people who accept Christ, who interested, in getting into a small group prayer. And we also offer online-only groups, and people can host groups far from Saddleback. So it's really for a lot of local people, it's a first impressions ministry where they can kind of get involved, and we drive them to a local campus or a local church, or we help them to actually bring the church to wherever they're at. If they're, a lot of people are watching in remote areas or don't have I would say a PD church, a church that's very like Saddleback. So we help provide a community for them.
That's really cool. I bet that we have a bunch of watchers or listeners that attend the online campus.
Hey, that's Jay.
So shout out to our online campus audience.
Yeah. I think the Lake Forest audience is probably like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
But then there's this huge, how many people watch like roughly the online services each week and come to the online campus?
Yeah, so last year on average, our average of our community was we had 20,000 people who watched 30 minutes or more. So not just a view, but like retention, 20,000 people. So yeah,
that's a little better than our show.
Well, it's a little, yeah.
And how many small groups? You guys have tons of small groups too, right?
Yeah, we have about 2,300 small groups.
Wow.
So
like all over like the world, right?
Yeah, all over.
That's
so
crazy.
So 60%
really cool.
meet in homes, 40% are online, and so and we're always trying to push them to become physical groups. And yeah, so it's again we have a large audience, so it is a lot of groups, but we also have a lot of people who watch. So
yeah, for sure. So anybody who's out there who sometimes kind of interacts with Saddleback Church, but you're not plugged in a group yet, Jay Crandall is the guy you need to talk to. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can just email me at jyk@saddleback.com. And you guys have already made
we plugged your email pretty hard.
I heard this. The jk@saddleback, and it's confusing.
I had to explain it to Jason.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I'm going to be honest.
jay, or you can just email online@saddleback.com.
Oh, that's easier.
That's probably easier.
Or we'll just put it in the description.
Yeah, that's true.
So you can just click on the email address in the show description.
We'll do so many favors for you guys. It's gonna be easy. All right, let's get into it. Let's talk about your fave. Who is your favorite Bible character? This is the reveal.
So Daniel is my favorite by far. My first son. I did not go with the first name, but his middle name is Daniel.
Sweet.
So and Doug knows this, but I named Jody and I named our first son Cash. So
after Daniel,
after all the money Daniel raked in, and so but no, so like we kind of like we really liked the name Cash, but I kind of felt conflicted as a pastor that his first name was Cash, so we went with that strong middle name Daniel.
But his middle name's Daniel.
Just FYI, we're not
Cash Money Crandall. Cash me outside? No. So tell us why Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons. The book of Daniel obviously has, so many. I mean, the first 6 chapters are like a narrative. The last 6 have all this prophecy stuff, which a lot of people don't necessarily really like go deep into.
Yeah.
But I just love the story of Daniel because it's a story of somebody who lived out their faith in not a very straightforward way. He was put into really pagan culture, and he thrived under 2 very famous empires, and those empires, one conquered the Jewish people, and then they got conquered, and so he had to figure out how to live out his faith in a non-direct way. And so I've always been, it's one thing to kind of like go to church, and if you have a bunch of Christian friends, and it's like that's one thing. It's like it's very straightforward, but how do you do it, in a way that it's not easy? And I think most people, again, in workplaces, that's not a Christian environment. How do I live out my faith in that context? Or with family members who are not Christians, how do I respond? I think Daniel is a great example of somebody thriving in a non-traditional kind of context, and I've always been intrigued on that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
But now it may be that it's faithfulness, so I may be, answered my own question. But if you could name just a trait, kind of like when you think of Daniel, that you're like, I love this about him. What is one trait that you would say really just kind of captures the essence of Daniel?
I definitely, you did steal it. It is faithfulness.
Great.
That was great. You got a little prophetic part of you. I love it.
Well, I read Daniel before coming in.
Great.
I had a dream. He interpreted it. It revealed.
Yeah, just don't bring no coal to my lips. I don't want to touch that. So many.
Isn't that Isaiah or Jeremiah?
It's more. Yeah, that's true. So I love his faithfulness. Again, like I think it's something that you rush through, but really thinking about, I've thought about this. Like, what if another country came in and like conquered us, and then not only conquered us, probably killed a bunch of my family and friends that I know, and then took the select group of people, the best, and carted them away. And Daniel's one of these people that he loses his culture, he loses a lot of people he knows, and he's thrown into this new context. And the easiest thing for him to do would have been to abandon, but somehow he figures out how to honor God in a way that is, to me, it's a lot of times I know you guys have probably talked about this on the show, but like you read parts of scripture and they just kind of like list something and you move on. But if you actually think about what he's going through, it makes me extremely sad and also proud that, it's this comeback story almost of somebody who doesn't let the situation rule him, that he figures out how to honor God. So his faithfulness, again, I think most people would have just figured out how to survive. They would have gone into survival mode, and he did it. He survived, but he learned how to thrive really. And so that faithfulness is something that I really love about him.
Can you give us, just for anybody who's not maybe too familiar with the story, who maybe hasn't spent too much time in the Old Testament or whatever, who doesn't know the Daniel story, can you give us just you've alluded to a few pieces of it, can you give us just a quick overview of Daniel? You talked about the captivity he was in. Can you just give us a few of the tidbits there for those who haven't read it? And you should read the book of Daniel.
Yeah, you should.
Especially after this conversation.
First 6 chapters, and then the later part you can
get a commentary for the rest of it.
Get a good commentary. So, you're coming to the end of the, Israel, Judah empire at the end of 2 Kings, where you have all these people that are bad and good kings, and really they've kind of gone on a trajectory of bad kings. The empire's already split into northern, southern.
Northern's gone at this point.
Yeah, northern's gone at this point, and now you just have the southern Judah, and essentially
hanging by a thread.
And ultimately, they kind of get overthrown by the Babylonian Empire. And this is where Nebuchadnezzar and all these people are very famous, but essentially comes in, and you can read at the end of 2 Kings this story. There's a lot of brutal things that happen, like the Babylonian Empire. There's one where the king comes in and makes him watch his kids get murdered.
Yeah,
and
it's bad.
There's all sorts of bad stuff, but you're thinking this is, again, Daniel's part of this and the people of Israel here. And obviously Israel has had this long story of being strong and surviving. And now I would think a lot of people in Israel thinks that, we're going to overcome this, because they've had hundreds of years of overcoming extreme circumstances. But this is not one of those times. And they literally, and so they get captured, and it says that they kind of got rid of most of the people, but they kept the best. And the idea is a lot of empires would do that they would take the best crop and kind of integrate them into some kind of mode. And so Daniel gets carted back to Babylonia, and he now is a servant there. And in the process of that, there's a couple of things that happen to him. One is they want him to eat a certain diet so he can survive a certain way. And he says no. He says, I'm going to eat this way, according to God's laws and in this certain way. And essentially he ends up being tested to be true. And they actually convert all the servants to eat this way. So that's one notch on his belt that, okay, God's ways are true. Another one is he, the king is having visions, and nobody can figure out what's going on. And ultimately, somebody finds out from somebody Daniel was good to, says, hey, there's this guy, Daniel, his God says that, he knows the future. And essentially Daniel's brought forward, and he tells the king what the vision is. And through that, the king loves him and rises him up. I believe it was second in power, essentially.
Yeah, he skyrockets, becomes his chief advisor.
Yeah, one of the chief advisors. And then through that, he has favor. He's ruling with, he has influence. And then there's, again, at the top, essentially the famous story that most people know is the Daniel in the lion's den, where essentially some people don't like Daniel's success, and what they do is they pretty much get him to contradict the king, even though there's a friendship. And one of it was Daniel, even though there were all these rules, he still loved God and he would pray. So they caught him praying to a different God, and they pretty much throw him into the lion's den. And the king didn't want it. And
the king's bummed. His hands are tied. He got tricked into making this law.
And it's a terrible, but of course, God protects Daniel in the lion's den. And so there's a bunch of these stories. Another one is the writing on the wall, which is a famous saying now. But there's all these stories of pretty much Daniel thriving in this context. And again, he survives under the Babylonian Empire when the Babylonians get conquered by the Persian Empire. I mean, Daniel has all these encounters with Nebuchadnezzar, Darius, even Xerxes one, and Cyrus a little bit. He has all these loose connections with all these famous people in history. And and so
he had to be considered this old time, by the end of his ministry, he had to be just thought of as this old timer who just knew the ropes. I've lived through every kingdom. I was there in Judah. I was there in Babylon. I was here for the Medes and the Persians. He's I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere. Yeah.
At some point, he probably just started smirking at kings and be like,
Yeah.
when you're gone, I'll still be
Well,
here.
in a way, he became like the Israel, like he just kept surviving and being successful. But yeah, so that's the quick overview. But if you read Daniel 1-6, there's just, again, so many stories, and there is like writing on the wall is one of those stories that there's a lot of sayings even from Daniel that are just kind of incorporated into American culture or even the English culture that's just abundantly true.
Yeah.
We should note too that I think it was last year Pastor Rick did a sermon series on Daniel.
Yeah.
So where he talks, I forget how long he spent in Daniel, but it was many, many weeks.
Yeah.
So it might be worth going back and watching that series too if you got a real interest in Daniel and haven't read it or know much about it.
Yeah, for sure. There's also the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story in there, which is fun. Kind of an adjunct story to him, like his buds, who are also pretty faithful and cool, which is great. This is a tangent, but the Daniel in the Lion's Den story, one of the funniest, the funniest depictions of that I've ever seen was in VeggieTales. They did
VeggieTales.
They did a Daniel in the Lion's Den thing, and the king was all fretting, and the king was that asparagus guy, and I think Larry the cucumber was Daniel. And at the end of that night where he was down there with the lion's den, and the king rushed back to see, like, and he called down, Daniel, are you okay? He's like, I'm fine. And he's like, see you later, guys, to the lions. He's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, we had pizza. Thinking that is such a funny depiction of that. Anyway, I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but we'll just give you a chance to clarify it if you want. But what do you think is the most important thing that you've learned personally and that you've tried to apply to your life from the Daniel story?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just that understanding of, I don't know, like, and we talk a lot about this at Saddleback of living out your faith. And what does that look like? And I think, Pastor Rick is a great model of this. And we talk a ton about the idea of, sharing truth in love. And I love that, Daniel obviously has a strong faith. He has a strong knowledge. Mm-hmm. He's able to, continue on even when he doesn't probably have he doesn't have like the Old Testament right there with him where he can just kind of carry it on.
Yeah.
But he figures out how to apply the principles of his faith in a very healthy way. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, it's, the tendency for, I think a lot of people is to be dogmatic, just like, here's the truth and coming here heavy. And, to be honest, if Daniel would have done that early on, he would have just been killed.
Yep.
And he figures out in a discernment, and that's the hard part, figuring out how do you do that in that context. But he figures out how to be true to his God and also to his boss. Mm-hmm. And it's a line that's a moving target. And obviously in moments he gets in trouble, in moments he gets rewarded. And so it isn't this like, if then that kind of thing. But for him, it ended up working out in the long run. But for me, it's being faithful to God and figuring out, with people, and most importantly, people I'm trying to be a witness to, like family members and different friends. If there's something I don't agree with, instead of just like, oh, you're in sin or you're a weirdo, I think Daniel has a great model of like, he was able to be around a lot of different people not like him. And he probably saw all sorts of things, but he was able to be in the room and be strong and be a light. And I think for me, that's like one of the things that has encouraged me the most, of just figuring out how to share Jesus in messy situations.
Yeah. And he kept his integrity. Like he was one who never compromised on anything, even though almost everyone around him was.
Right.
Which is,
he knew how to, like, when I think of Daniel, it seems like to me, he knew how to draw the line. He knew how to draw the line in the sand in the right place. Like he submitted to the kings and to the powers that he knew that God had placed over him, that God had allowed to exist, Paul, and is it Romans or 1 Corinthians, where he talks about submitting to authorities because God has placed those authorities. And God even says that he used the Babylonian Empire as an agent of his will against Israel, who had turned from him. And he knew how to submit to those authorities and have good relationships with the authorities that existed, but he also knew where to draw the line and say, but I won't go past this point. Yeah. Like on these issues, I will not bend. I cannot change. And if it means I die for that, so be it. Yeah. So man, he was a great blend of like, he knew how to pick the right hill to die on. Yeah. And I think that's important for us in culture, especially a culture that, seems like it's turning further and further away from the values that we see in the scripture I think we have to find a way to exist in our culture like that. The culture is turning, and there are certain ways that we can maintain our voice in culture by making sure we submit in the right areas, but we also have to know what are our non-negotiables, the things that we will not bow down to, the things that we will not let go of. And he did that so well. Mm-hmm. And that was really a lot of the thrust of Rick's series on that too.
Yeah, it was.
Which is really,
it was the main
really
theme
great
of the
stuff.
whole series. Yeah, definitely.
All right, take us on.
So this is kind of a fun question. If you could go back in time and witness one moment of Daniel's life, what would it be and why?
Before I was like, anywhere in time? Oh, we're talking about Daniel.
We're talking about Daniel. Welcome back to the episode.
Sorry.
The moment of creation.
I know. Be there. I probably wouldn't
Let
be able
there
to
be
breathe.
light.
That probably wouldn't be the best time.
Hold your breath. God, create already.
No air, gravity. This is a bad idea.
Or space, for that matter.
That's true. I'm just getting crushed. So that was a good joke. So yeah, for me with Daniel, I mean, you can go to one of those prophecy moments and totally be like, I want to see what the world was actually happening. And,
what was that goat thing?
I know,
and the
what's going
wheels.
on?
And
And there's this idol and miry clay
and a bear.
little horn. I have no idea what's going on here. Did you see it? Was it a claymation? Like Wallace and Gromit? What was going on? But
I'm sure it'd be
Wallace and Gromit.
very interesting to sit there watching Daniel have this prophecy. I wonder what he's thinking.
Whoa, he's
Why
into
are
it.
his eyes bugging?
He's into it.
But outside of all that stuff, I mean, I got to tell you, I mean, for sure the Lion's Den thing is, I mean,
That's pretty legit.
It has to be the one. Because first off, it's a successful story. I don't
it
want to
doesn't
be there
end
for
in
like the
carnage.
clunker or anything like that. But
And don't show up early for the guy before him.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh. And so
Be right on time and get out of there when it's over.
I just I want to see I would love to see the king's face more. Like they talk about how he felt stuck, but I would love to see. I think you get a good understanding of their friendship and their connection based off that. And also just then you have the gotcha moment when Daniel survives the next morning of the guys who threw him in. I would love to see, I mean, I'm not going to hang around and watch them get thrown into the lion's den, but just seeing that, seeing how many lions are in there, what does that look like? I think that whole moment is such an interesting, there's so much there and it's so famous. So I would love to, I mean, that's definitely something if in heaven they have a playback zone, I want to
Playback zone in heaven.
Maybe in heaven there's a TiVo that's been recording all of human history. And you can just go back and watch whatever you want.
I think the only thing that would be problematic is can we watch people sin in heaven anyways, besides the point.
That's mind-bending theology right there. Probably it's a no. Just probably get to the
But
chase
we
there.
remember, anyways. Okay, go. You have to drop that.
I think another fun one could be. I definitely agree. If I was picking a favorite character, it would have been Daniel actually, and I think a close second to that one for me would be when Gabriel appears to him.
Yeah,
I'd be like, let's see what this whole conversation went down like.
Totally.
Let's see.
so much. Even that whole thing they say I couldn't get to you in time, and there's a time thing going on, and
Yeah, he says.
So,
he says as soon as you began to pray, a command was given, and I was sent. But he says that he was thwarted on his journey by the prince
did
of the
that look
power
like?
of
we
Persia.
got Constantine action going on.
References to this angelic battle, and then he said Michael had to come and help me out so I could get back on my way.
What is going
It was like, dang, that is a serious glimpse into spiritual warfare, and it's always so tantalizing. It's always just these tidbits that get you thinking. Anyway, that's a good one. I think I'd probably go back for that one too. If you could ask him one question, what would it be?
I mean, for sure, and this is going to be my bent, but for sure, I would ask something around. So again, we were talking about earlier about all these people he interacted with, of Nebuchadnezzar to Darius to Cyrus, Xerxes, all these different people. I'm not going to argue which Xerxes, and there's so many things you can go down here, but essentially, I would love to know some traits, leadership traits that he learned from those people, because obviously, and that's the complexity of God used those empires in some way. He wasn't blessing everything they were doing, but they were used, even Israel was conquered for reasons of their own doing. Yeah. And so Babylon was used by God in that way. But I would love to know, what did he learn from those pagan kings that are so famous? And he got to know some of them pretty well, or he knew people who knew them. And I would love to what's his leadership lifters, kind of thing that he took away from these famous people, because regardless of they were bad people in some aspects, they did have good traits. Even King Nebuchadnezzar had some good traits. Darius had good traits. And so like, I would love to know like, how did you grow as a person through watching them? And that whole principle, you can learn from anybody. That would probably I'd be asking some questions around there.
Yeah. Hey, talking about Nebuchadnezzar and stuff too, one of the things that I think is just like most encouraging or inspirational, for lack of a less cliche word, about the Daniel story is that Daniel's ministry, for lack of a better word, in these pagan kingdoms actually drew worship out of these pagan kings. There's that whole passage where Nebuchadnezzar, after he regains his sanity, because there's that whole part of the story where he like basically turns into an animal.
What type of grass did he eat? I want to know.
I know. What did that do to his stomach? It just seems like digestion, man. Did he chew the cud? Did he ruminate? Anyway, and then there's that whole moment where he regains his sanity after, I think it was like 7 years or something like that. It was a long time. And he goes into this whole worship refrain, praising the God of Daniel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so it's cool that in the midst of a vast and powerful ancient Near Eastern empire, Daniel rubbed off on the king more than the king rubbed off on Daniel. That's saying something.
I know.
And he that started when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
So it's like anybody who looks at themselves and thinks, man, like, what am I ever going to accomplish in my lifetime, or what can God use me for? I think Daniel's proof that you can be like the ethnically oppressed, like captive nation. You can be completely starting from the bottom, and God can use you for something truly incredible.
I was going to add that what I love about that, and it's something that I think a lot of people struggle with, is it's that whole idea that he was able to be around culture not like him and positively influence. And so obviously we talk about a lot at Saddleback, and Rick talks about this, that with culture, you reject, receive, redeem. And there's different aspects of that. Of culture you can redeem, some you can receive, and some you just need to straight up reject. And with him, he was able to redeem that through his light. And I was thinking about, I read some book recently. It was a non-Christian author. I posted something up online about, this guy was really interesting read. And, a friend of a friend posted like, that person's not a Christian, you should not read him. And there was this drastic, and I understand where this individual is coming from.
Sure.
But there's this natural bent to kind of like, we can't even be around that. But obviously all throughout ultimately, even when you go back to the beginning of the story of the people of Israel, the Abrahamic covenant is supposed to be the key part of that covenant, that the last part is to be a blessing to the entire world, a light to all nations. And over again, even when you get to the temple, you have this whole separate court for Gentiles because they didn't want to mingle. And Israel keeps on messing up with how to share their faith. And I think it leads over to how we share our faith, that we tend to like to segment our lives out. And Daniel, with stuff like that, he was able to be around all these different people. And obviously Jesus did this. He sat at the table, ate with people that the Pharisees and all the people would never. And that's something that just gets me like, why do people struggle with that? Why do I struggle with that? It's, and it's, sometimes you got to be worried about perception, but it's just something that being messy and figuring out how to live out your faith that way.
I think it's one element that's so cool about his story is that he always knew that God was working. No matter what the situation was, as awful as it appeared, he knew that God was working. And so I think that's kind of a big takeaway from his story, and that's something that everybody who's watching or listening can relate to, is that no matter what your situation is, maybe you're working for an awful boss who, but it doesn't mean that God isn't working and that God can't use you as a light or to rub off, or, whatever. Just trust that God's working.
Rick has a quote that says, you can't win your enemies to Christ. You can only win your friends. So you need to start making friends with people you disagree with. And that's a much harder road for sure. I mean, it's easy to just be like, you're not in my group, so you're out of my face, and I don't. But when we do that, we kind of throw aside our Jesus-given responsibility to share Christ with the world. So
and you just no longer like Jesus.
You can't write them off. You can't be like Jesus if you're not willing to be around people who disagree with you. but it's hard. It's hard. And Daniel probably had it the hardest.
Yes.
So it's kind of like God gives us this great example of like, this is about as hard as it gets, people. And if he can do it, you better figure it out. All right, let's ask a couple like fun rapid fire questions real quick. Just let's bring Daniel into the 21st century with us for a minute.
Okay.
If you were going to cast Daniel as a superhero, what superhero do you think he'd be?
Ant-Man? No, I'm just kidding. I don't. That's a great question. I mean, I guess like a Captain America, I would probably say, because he's like noble and has high integrity.
Makes
and
sense.
faithful. Yeah, really hard to corrupt.
So he'd be like a Captain Judah.
Yeah,
Captain Judah.
Come on, Cap.
Black Panther.
Well, let's not Americanize this ancient Israeli guy. All right.
That famous superhero Captain Judah.
I know.
I think that's a good call. If you had said Batman or something, I wouldn't have bought it. That wouldn't have made any sense.
No. Yeah. Okay. Do you think that Daniel would have a preferred Coke or Pepsi?
I think he would toe the line on this one and just pick Coke. I think he would probably just.
I think with the Daniel plan, he'd probably say water.
Yeah, he probably would. But yeah, I'm not touching that one. Yeah, so Coke. Yeah.
All right. If Daniel was in an Olympic sport, which event do you think he
I
would
was
compete
thinking
in?
tiger blood. He would like have tiger blood. You know, he
can't say-
conquered the dinosaurs.
tiger blood.
Yeah.
You can't say if Daniel was an Olympic
I
sport.
said in an Olympic sport.
No, you did
That's
not.
what I said.
I did not hear that.
All right. We'll see. Everyone,
that?
everyone hit the 10-second back button, please, and see who's
comment
right.
on that.
Anyway, which sport do you think you'd compete in?
Oh,
This isn't that hard.
You can't say
I think
you
it's
play for
pretty
the
obvious.
Lakers.
you
think it's pretty-
Olympic sport. That is such an interesting. I mean, I guess I would pick pole vaulting. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I like that. And what makes you think pole vaulting?
It's ancient.
That's
Okay.
pretty good.
Yeah, that's
That's
my
pretty
only-
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
What were you thinking?
I wasn't thinking of anything. I was just trying to put pressure on you by making it seem easy.
I was like, really.
I was like something regarding lions.
I mean, I'm thinking
don't
about
know.
still, like, what are the things that he could do? Like, I was thinking, are there any sports where, like, it takes a lot of, like, that type of concentration? Because I don't think he had a lot of space.
Curling
in
is the answer.
Curling, yeah, that's true. Like, yeah,
That's the answer.
pole vaulting.
God
okay.
hadn't invented winter yet, guys.
Okay, who would play Daniel in a movie of his life?
Oh, Daniel Day-Lewis. Anyway.
Yes, yes.
Except he's done now, right? He doesn't want to act anymore.
He has said that before. He'll come back.
Don't worry about it.
That's good. Would Daniel prefer to use pen or pencil?
Oh, pen, like one of those ancient feather. Like he would go old school.
Oh, like a quill,
Oh,
Like it would be ink. That's really what
ink and quill.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd be like, the word of the Lord is immutable. I will not be writing in
True.
pencil.
Separate pen for writing out God. He would have the whole thing.
Oh, that's good. Jay, is there anything you want the listeners and viewers of Doable Discipleship to know?
I mean, I would just say that if you're watching this and or listening to it and you're somewhere where you don't have a church or you're not plugged in, you would love to get plugged into Saddleback, check out Saddleback's online community. We would love to get you into a group. We even offer class 101 and 201 online right now. So go to saddleback.com/online or email online@saddleback.com. We would love to provide a way, even if it's to find you a local church. We'll help facilitate that.
Sweet. We'll give you lots of links in the show notes. We'll tell you how to get that series from Pastor Rick. We'll link you to Jay's email and the
Also,
small
like,
group's website.
Go read the book of Daniel.
Jason will talk. Go read the book of Daniel.
Yeah, I
for
figure
sure.
that's a
think
good
it's obvious.
encouragement for doable discipleship.
This is a pretty, yeah. If this doesn't tease the book of Daniel for you, there's nothing that will. Jay, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
We'll have you on again real soon. I thought you were going to say something like this. Okay.
I was like,
I didn't know if we were ending right
Hey,
there.
don't lean against our real wood backdrop.
Yeah,
you
you're-
made it
the
wiggle.
illusion.
you just broke continuity for all of our episodes. All right, let's end with that. We love you. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you're a podcast listener and you enjoyed this episode, consider giving us a rating or a review on iTunes. If you do, you'll help other people find us in the future. And if you're thinking, hey, listening's great, but is there a way I can watch these episodes? Yeah, there is. Subscribe to the Saddleback Church YouTube channel for video versions of these conversations, plus lots of other video content. And if you're already watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast so you can listen in the car or wherever else you go. Lastly, you can always get in touch with us by emailing maturity@saddleback.com. Send us your thoughts, send us your questions, your Bible questions, your life questions, whatever. Who knows? Your question just might inspire an upcoming episode. Thanks again for tuning into Doable Discipleship. I'm Doug Jones, and I hope you'll join us again next week.